Hey everybody, happy Thursday noon, aka 12:19 tutorial stream. How's everybody doing on this lovely Thursday? We are not surprisingly having a hot and sunny Thursday here in Dallas because it's July and it's pretty much hot and sunny everything for all, the rest of the, time of the universe. But not really, just only until about November. So, happy lunchtime crafting time. I hope everyone is excited about making a fun project. Today we are going to do this one. This is our Hinge top hammered bracelet. So this is a pretty standard type of construction. This is something that you see a lot. And you can do this with varying levels of kind of DIY. Today we're going to make the whole thing. So we're actually going to make our bracelet piece, and then we're going to make our centerpiece, and that of course just fastens with a little tension closure there. You can actually buy these pieces pre-made as well, so if you don't want to deal with making your bracelet piece, you can absolutely buy that pre-made. I don't know if they have them pre-made in base metal though. You might be stuck with sterling if you get pre-made, but it is a product that does exist out there. And so the way that this works is you're just going to open the hinge, pop it on your wrist, and then close it up. So a couple of things to think about when you're making a bracelet like this. Number one is that it fits kind of like a bangle bracelet, but since it has an opening, it doesn't actually need to be big enough to go over your knuckles. So that's a good thing, especially if you like your bracelets to be a little bit tighter fitting. You need to make sure that this piece here is not too long, because if you have it, if it's wider than your wrist, it's going to be really awkward to wear. So you just generally want to keep that piece to about an inch or an inch and a quarter or so. Also, it does tend to work better with a piece that's a little bit flatter. If you get something that's really, really oval or three-dimensional, it tends to kind of press into your wrist. It's not very comfortable to wear. So let's talk tools and supplies for this afternoon's tutorial. You are going to need a centerpiece bead. I'm going to use this cool Mexican glass bead. I think that's going to be fun on my bracelet today. You're going to need 20 gauge wire. I'm going to use 20 gauge bronze wire on my piece today, and that's going to be for, of course, the centerpiece here. And then you're going to need some 14 or even 12 gauge wire. I'm going to use 14 because that's what I happen to have today in bronze, and that's going to be for your band or your actual bracelet part. Then as far as tools go, you're going to need your three basics. You are going to need your chain nose pliers, you're going to need a round nose pliers, you're going to need a wire cutter. You're going to want a bracelet mandrel, preferably an oval mandrel in steel. Okay, so this is a heavy tool. So you can see the mandrel is oval, it's not round. And then it is what's called a stepped mandrel, which means that rather than tapering, you have 4 different sections, each of which is consistently sized. You could use a tapered mandrel for this tutorial as well. It's going to work just as well. But you do need a steel mandrel because we are going to hammer on this. If you have a wooden mandrel, you can hammer to your heart's content. All you're going to succeed in doing is bashing up your mandrel. You need a chasing hammer. If you don't have a chasing hammer, just your regular old ball peen hammer will suffice for this. And then the one thing that I forgot to put on the supply list is a file or an emery board is going to be helpful, and that is just for the end of this little hook closure here. So right where this kind of flips up, which is the closure of your bracelet, it can get a little bit rough, and so we want to make sure that we just can sand that down so that it's not rough and scratchy. So how much wire do you cut for your bracelet piece? So we are going to work this off of your typical bracelet measurement. Once again, since it's not a true bangle, you don't need to worry about the size of your knuckles. You just need to worry about what size bracelet you want. I typically wear a 7-inch bracelet. You're going to add probably about a ½ an inch onto your center bead with all of the wire wrapping and everything. So my center bead is 1 inch. That means I'm going to have about 1.5 inches on my center. So if I subtract that from 7, that gives me 5.5 inches. And then I want to add back about 3/4 of an inch for this loop and this little piece right here. So what was that? 5.5 plus 3/4 is 6¼ inches. So that's what I'm going to cut of my 14 gauge bronze wire. Now if you're using something heavy duty like a 14 gauge, make sure that you have a good heavy duty wire cutter. You don't want to use your, what did I say, 6 1/4? Okay, so 6 1/4. You don't want to use your really delicate cutters that you use for cutting, you know, your 26s and 28 gauges, because they're not hardened to be sturdy enough to hold up to your 14 gauge wire, especially in bronze. So make sure you got a good heavy duty wire cutter. And I'm going to start by making my loop, and I'm going to make my loop just because this is going to make it a little bit easier for me to hold this while I am hammering it. So I'm just going to take my round nose pliers, grab the end of your wire, and since this is 14 gauge, you want to grab it fairly far down on the tool, because if you don't, what's going to happen is you're not going to be able to hold it. The tips of the tool are not sturdy enough to hold this heavy gauge wire, so you're going to go, you know, fairly far down, at least halfway, if not more. You're going to brace your thumb against the wire, and you're going to press on your thumb as you roll your pliers over to start making the loop. And when I say press on my thumb, I'm not kidding. Like, I'm legitimately pressing on my thumb. So that extra brace that you get from your thumb, that's what's going to help you create a nice look. And it doesn't have to be your thumb, whatever, you know, whatever finger is convenient is fine. Like, as I continue it around, I'm going to use my index finger instead. But what I'm doing is I'm pushing the wire around as I'm moving it with my pliers, and that's going to enable me to get a really nice kind of tight loop. And notice that my loop is very isolated on the end of my wire, so I didn't bend all of this wire out of shape while I was making my loop. I made a nice tight loop. So now I'm going to go ahead and take this and I'm going to wrap it around my bracelet mandrel, and I'm going to use at least one size smaller than what I want my bracelet to be. So my bracelet, I think I'm going to use, is going to be about this size, so I'm going to use the very end. So I'm just going to take my wire, and this is why I made my little loop, because it makes a really nice hold for my thumb. And I'm just going to take this all the way around my mandrel like so, and there's the end. Now here comes the fun and tricky part. I need to hold this wire tightly around my mandrel, and usually I do that by cradling my mandrel in my, I'm a right-handed person, so usually I will cradle my mandrel in my left hand, and I will rest the tang of the mandrel, that's that square part at the bottom, I'll rest that against my chest. Now if you have a proper jeweler's bench, if you are proper jewelers out there and you have an actual jeweler's bench, hey Sophia, there's actually a slot in the bench for the tang of your mandrel to go into. Alternatively, you can also clamp it in a vise, but I use this mandrel, you know, little enough that it's more trouble than it's worth to, you know, clamp it in a vise and all of that. So usually when I need to do it, I'll just hold it. But not gonna lie, it is a bit awkward. If you have a sandbag, you can also put the end of the mandrel on the sandbag. So then I'm just gonna take my chasing hammer, and I'm going to just hammer, and I'm gonna have to do this off camera because there's not enough height, but I'm just gonna hammer that entire area. So I'm gonna hammer all the way around, okay? And you're gonna have to readjust occasionally, but bear in mind that the mandrel is oval, okay? So you don't wanna rotate it so that the opening is to the side, okay? You wanna make sure that you leave it centered on the mandrel. Otherwise, you're gonna wind up with a very weird shape. So, did I say don't smash your hand? I feel like even if I did say it, it bears saying again. And then when I get to the end, that's not curled. So when I get to this end right here, I'm gonna actually hammer that really hard, and I'm gonna paddle that out flat. Okay, so now I have my hammered bracelet form. So the hammering does two things. Number one, it gives your wire a nice texture. You can see how it has the pretty shiny bits on it now. But number two, your hammering work hardens your wires. So this is a lot sturdier now than it was before. It's a lot harder to bend out of shape. Now, the shape on this is a little wonky, so I'm just going to take my chain nose pliers and I'm going to fix a couple of things. Number one, this loop, when I bent this around my mandrel, came kind of out of plane, so I want to just bring that back so that it's in the same plane as my bracelet. So when I'm looking at the side of my bracelet, I really shouldn't be able to see through that loop. This here is going to turn into my little hook, and a word to the wise, don't make that hook too curvy, okay? I always think about it more as almost a tab than a hook, because if you make it curve over too much here, you're not going to be able to get this piece on. So I'm just going to grab my round nose, I'm going to go down just a little bit, and I'm just going to bend that up. So we're going to try that angle. That might even be too sharp of an angle. I might have to bring that back a bit. I can fix the shape of my bracelet. My wrist is very flat, so it always works better for me if I just slightly flatten the oval of my bracelet, which I'm just going to do by literally pinching my ends down. And when I'm doing that, I want to make sure I have my fingers inside of my bracelet to brace. Otherwise, what's going to want to happen is your bracelet's just going to make one really sharp bend, which isn't what you want. You're just trying to, if your wrists are shaped like mine, you are just trying to make it more of an oval shape. So now we have this kind of like half Kermit the Frog thing going on here. And then at the end here, this is where I'm just going to use my emery board, sandpaper, file, whatever you happen to have, and I'm just going to file that down so that it's not stabby, which it's not. Awesome. So then that is my bracelet piece. See how easy that was? And well, we're going to set that aside. So now I'm going to cut some of my 20 gauge wire for my centerpiece, which means I need to make sure I have my centerpiece. And I'm going to grab my 20 gauge. How much wire you cut for this is really dependent upon how intricate do you want this part to be. How many times around do you want to wrap? Figure every time you go around you need at least the length of your stone plus a little bit of extra for the coiling. So for this one I used minimum 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus the wraps. So I probably used a foot of wire on this one. I'm just going to go ahead and cut myself 1.5 feet to be safe for today, just because I know I can always cut it off. And you can add a wire on this. It's not super graceful to add a wire on this project, so this is one of those where it really is better to start with more than you think you're going to need. Okay, so now I'm going to start with a basic wire wrapped loop right there. That's going to be the main attachment point for this side of my hinge top. So basic wire wrap loop, for anybody who's not familiar, is one of my favorite techniques to use and teach. It is, as far as I'm concerned, the most useful, or one of the most useful things you can possibly teach yourself as far as wire crafting techniques or joy construction techniques in general, because you can do so many things with it, like this necklace, and my earrings all used, and my necklace because I have a little drop on the back of it, all used basic wire wrapping. And it's like that pretty much every day. Like almost everything that I wear has some sort of basic wire wrapped component, just because it's really one of the best ways to connect two things together. If you're not able to solder them, it's the next best thing to soldering as far as security, and it looks cool too. So to make our basic wire wrap loop, I'm going to take my round nose pliers and I'm going to grab on my wire about 2 inches, 2 to 3 inches or so from the top of the wire. I want to make a fairly large loop, so I'm going to go around the middle of my pliers, and I'm going to hold my wire tight enough that it's not wobbling around, but not so tight that I cut through it, because if you really mash down with your round nose pliers, you'll actually create a little divot, see, in your wire, and that's a weak spot where your wire is going to be prone to breaking off. So I just want to make sure that I don't create that weak spot, but that I do hold this firmly enough that my wires aren't sort of wobbling around. I'm going to take my non-plier hand, for me that's my left hand, and I'm going to push my wire over my pliers and away from me at a 90-degree angle. Okay, so I've made a flat angle. Now, if I were working in a normal position rather than trying to show this to my hand cam, I would have this in front of me, so that first bend would have been going away from me. Now I'm going to take my pliers and I'm going to loosen them up so that they are not gripping the wire anymore. I'm going to just rotate them up 1/8 of a turn, and I'm going to grab again. So what I've done is I'm now grabbing right on that corner that I just made. Now I'm going to pull the shorter piece of wire back up over the top towards me and down until it hits the other wire in front. So what I'm doing now is I'm starting to make a circle. See how I'm forming a circle around my pliers. Now I need to get my pliers out of the way, so I'm just going to loosen them, rotate, and grab. And I'm going to finish that circle by pushing underneath my pliers and away from me to make this shape. So this shape is what we refer to as our lady with a scarf, because it looks like a lady if she were in a convertible, motoring along with a dramatically long scarf trailing out behind her. Okay, this is basically your loop. All we have to do now is close it. So I'm going to take my chain nose pliers, I'm going to hold across that loop, like so, and then I'm going to wrap. So I'm going to wrap around starting at the base of my loop. And I'm not going to coil down too far, I'm just going to go about 2.5 coils. And I want my coils to be as tight as possible to my core wire, and I want my coils to be as close as possible to each other. Once I've done those 2.5 coils, I'm going to go ahead and trim my wire off. And then you are going to have a little pokey stabby bit. So we want to go ahead and press that pokey stabby bit down. So the key to that is to just kind of grab it with your chain nose and press it down. If you're having trouble getting a hold of it, try holding the wire loop that you just made. That's going to prevent your piece from spinning, and it's going to make that a little easier. So now I got that pressed down. I'm going to put my centerpiece bead on that wire. Like so. And then I'm going to do a second basic wire wrap loop, and I want to leave a little bit of wiggle room because I want a little bit of space to put those extra wire wraps. So you don't want to leave a ton of room, but I'm just going to do like 1/8 of an inch on either side. So typically when we were doing this, we would grab with our pliers touching the top of our bead, but since I want to leave that little bit of space, I'm just going to ooch up just a little bit. Then we're going to go away, rotate, back up over the top, wow, that's a first. Let's try that again, shall we? I think I said all the steps, but I didn't do all the steps. Let's try that again. The fact that I hit myself in the face with my wire might have had something to do with the fact that I didn't actually do that right. So once again, we're going to go away, rotate your pliers, back up over the top. Don't hit yourself in the face like I just did. Much better. All right, so now we're starting to make our loop. Rotate and underneath, like so. So now we're going to hold across our loop with our chain nose pliers. Ta-da! And then we're going to wrap down 2.5 or 3 wraps. Okay, now don't cut this wire off. Now we're going to start doing that decorative wire wrapping on our centerpiece. So I'm just going to kind of scooch my center bead up, and I'm going to take my wire. The first one's always a pain. So what you want, and you can turn these loops, but you want to make sure that your loops are flat. So when you look down at your piece, you should be looking through the center hole of your loops, and then you're going to wrap around the sides of your bead. So you're going to just hold that bead up, go around the side, and you can go under or over. Usually I'll pick whichever one seems more stable. In this case, it seems to be over. So I'm just going to go over that wire wrap that's there, and I'm going to wrap it around, and make sure you're just wrapping around this stick and you're not interfering with that loop. Once you got the first one done, it gets easier because now it'll kind of hold itself. So I'm going to go back down the other side and wrap around, and then come on. There we go. Okay, so again, I'm just going to go around the outside and wrap around the outside and wrap, and you can keep doing this as much as you want. I think I'm just going to go ahead and go till I've used up my wire. One indicator sometimes that it's time to stop is when you kind of run out of space here, which I am running out of space, but I'm going to be a renegade and I'm just going to do it. And you don't have to always go over or always go under. Really do whatever feels like it's going to work best for the particular part of the project you're working on. Okay, so now I'm legitimately out of wire, and this, I'm definitely encroaching on this loop a lot, so I want to make sure, so I'm going to stop. So I'm going to take this, and I just want to, actually, I'm going to stop back here. I'm going to wrap it around 1 or 2 more times, just to finish it off, and then trim it. And you once again are going to have a little pokey stabby end there, which we don't want. So we're going to press that end in. And what you can actually do when you've got this much wire working is you can actually take that wire and fold it at a 90-degree angle like that, and then just kind of squish it in so that it sort of tucks in there. All right, and there is my little organic wire wrapped centerpiece. Now all we have to do is put the bracelet together. Super, super easy. I'm going to use the more open and free of the 2 loops as the loop that is going to attach on my little hook. So that means that this other loop is going to get attached here. Very easy to do that. Just use your chain nose pliers to grab that circle, twist it open, thread that. Goodness. Make sure you twist it open enough that you actually have an opening. Thread that on there, like so, and then close it up. Remember that you need to close it to the point where you can't see wire, or you can't see light in between those 2. And then the last thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to put some tension on this closure, because right now, first of all, it's way too close, and second of all, it doesn't have any tension on it to keep it closed. So I'm just going to take this bracelet, I'm going to pull it open, and I may at this point discover that, oh shoot, I made this too big. If I did, no big deal. You're just going to clip off some of this loop, clip off this, re-roll your loop, and then re-hammer and bend your end. Because see, it's not quite big enough even yet, and see how that's not really seating well in there, so I need to pull it out a little bit more. So what you want with a bracelet like this is you want to have to sort of reach and grab the closure with your center bead. So this one turned out a little bit bigger than I was expecting, but it's still about the same size as my prototype, and I bet you it still fits me. So again, you're just going to put your hand through there, and then you want to have to sort of, you know, reach for that for that little hook, and you just want to reach with your center bead, drop it on there, she says, whilst being incapable of doing that. There we go. Ta-da! So you just want to kind of hear a little click, and you want that center bead to be really seated in the bottom of that hook. And as long as you've got good tension on there, it's not going to come off. And you do want to make sure you don't make this hook too tall. Mine is probably about 3/16 of an inch, because if this is too tall, it's going to catch on absolutely everything, which is not any kind of fun when you're trying to wear it. So that's actually it for our noon project today. That was a pretty simple one. So anybody who doesn't know me out there, thanks for watching. I'm Allison from Beading Dreams in Dallas, Texas. Thank you for spending a little bit of your lunchtime hour with us on our Hinge Top Hammered bracelet. Hopefully that was a fun project. Hopefully you learned something new and exciting that you can take into your own jewelry crafting, or at the very least, hopefully you were distracted from your workday or your chores or whatever you're doing today for a little bit. So you can find us on this channel, twitch.tv/Beading Dream 5 times a week. Yay! Hi, Lori. You can find us on this channel, twitch.tv/Beading Dream 5 times a week with complimentary tutorials. We are here Monday through Saturday at 6 p.m. Wednesday through Saturday at 6 p.m. Central Time with complimentary tutorials. We do wire working, we do fiber crafts, we do bead weaving, and we do fabrication. Tonight is a fabrication class because it is Torch Thursday. So that means tonight we're going to be doing this one. This is our multi-mixed metal pendant. This is a really fun one of doing kind of faux bezel settings for some textured pieces of metal. So that's going to be our torch class. It's going to be tonight at 6 p.m. Central Time on this channel. And of course, if you can't tune in for tomorrow night, we've got Freeform Friday. On Friday, I don't know what I'm going to be doing, but I guarantee you it's going to be something fun. And then another fun class on Saturday, followed by a live merchandise sale. So everyone have a fan-freaking-tastic rest of your Thursday. I hope everyone has a good one. Stay cool if you're in Texas or somewhere else where it's hot. Stay warm if you're somewhere where it's cold. I don't know if I have any viewers from places where it's currently cold, because I don't think Boots is on right now. So everyone have a great Thursday, and I'll see y'all back on this channel, twitch.tv/Beading Dream tonight at 6.